Welcome to another episode of Agenda AWANI. I'm Shepherson Johari, and today we're recording this episode from Grab's headquarters in Singapore. And just to give you a bit of background, Grab's recently celebrated its 5th anniversary with a total number of downloads of 45 million downloads over the last 5 years, and that makes Grab's the biggest e-hailing service in Southeast Asia. Now today we'll talk about how has this company, the company which was founded in Kuala Lumpur 5 years ago, and then they moved to KL, they moved to Singapore of course, how has this company helped to uplift the livelihood, especially in terms of transportation in Singapore. To talk more about this, I have here as the head of Grab Singapore, Mr. Lim K. Cal J.
Yes.
I'll call you Cal J. All right. First and foremost, congratulations! It's the 5th anniversary, and you've given us, shared us a very interesting data. Well, people need to understand that Singapore is a small country, and out of total 700, about 800 square kilometers of the size, 12% are meant for roads. Well, if you compare it to 14% for housing, then 12% is quite huge. So the way forward, and in Singapore you cannot build more roads. The only way forward is to actually take out cars from the road. And Grab has enabled or helped the government to achieve that by taking off 19,000 cars. So can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So I'll just share some context about Singapore. I think Singapore as a country is quite unique in Southeast Asia, in the sense that it's quite small geographically, yet we have over 5 million people who live and work in Singapore every day. And you're right, so out of the land mass that we have, already 12% of that land mass has been dedicated to roads. As a comparison to other developed countries, for example in Europe, that number is a lot lower. It's less than 5%. So 12% is quite a lot, and we just can't build more roads in the land that we have. So how then do we then address the transportation issues in a busy and growing city like Singapore? For Grab, our goal is to, one of our goals in Singapore is to help to take away cars off the road. And the only way to do that really is to improve the utilization of these vehicles. So when we started in Singapore, we started out with a taxi app, right? Back in 2013. And the goal then was to help our taxi drivers to get more jobs, and also for passengers to be able to get a ride more easily. So improving the efficiency
and matching those two.
And matching the passengers and drivers. And we've gotten great feedback, right? When we first launched that, taxi drivers were earning better incomes, passengers were able to get a ride much more quickly. Since then, we also realized that, the situation in Singapore is such that the demand patterns is quite, it fluctuates quite a lot, right? So during peak hours, for example, demand can be 3 times higher than normal. When it rains, or when
something wrong goes MRT.
Yes, right. Or during just the normal Friday rush hour, right? So we did a study, and in order for us to meet that kind of demand, we actually need 50% more taxis on the road, which is not practical because during off-peak hours you don't need those taxis, and there's no place to park those taxis. So that's why we then launched a service called Grab Car back in 2015 to complement the taxi supply that we have, especially during the peak hours.
And when you introduce Grab Car back then, and there's a lot of criticism, especially from the taxi drivers. You say that you're killing the taxi industry here, but actually you're not. The data says that it's the otherwise. You're helping the taxi drivers to earn more
Right.
So, during those period, how do you communicate this? How do you educate them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. So I think naturally there's always concerns. And when we launch a new service that seems to be sort of disrupting the previous service that we have. But in reality, we have introduced services that actually helps our taxi drivers. So one example, it's a recent example, also thanks to the support from the Singapore government, where we were allowed to apply the technology that we have with private cars, more specifically the dynamic pricing. Pricing that goes higher during peak hours and then comes lower during off-peak hours. So that has been a key differentiator of why the private car industry has been doing so well versus the taxis. So what we have done is we applied that technology into the taxi industry, and arguably is the first in the world where we're allowed to do that. So Singapore was one of the first places where taxi drivers are able to pick up jobs that's based on dynamic fixed price. So that becomes a lot more efficient in terms of matching demand and supply.
Do you have data of how much they have earned more?
Yeah, so we have. So a month after we launched this service, which we call Just Grab, because you just want to just grab to anywhere. We found that taxi drivers who take on Just Grab jobs, they earn $100 more per week.
All right.
Before incentives, right? So it is having an impact on the income of the drivers.
All right, we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about how has Singapore. I mean, issue with Singapore. There's a lot more people now. They don't have cars. Car ownership are basically going down here in Singapore. Among the reason is because of the efficiency in transport, in public transportation, and also because of e-hailing services like yours, Grab. So we'll talk more about that after this. Welcome back to AWANI. We're still with the Grab country head here in Singapore, Lim KJ, and we're recording this at Grab's headquarters in Singapore. And we talk about how has the ecosystem or the efficiency and the transportation efficiency here in Singapore has enabled the citizen to not rely on private transportation, i.e. cars. So, and since you've been around here since 5 years in Singapore, I guess?
7 years.
7 years in Singapore. There's a lot of, have you basically see the numbers going down in terms of car ownership?
Yeah, so Grab launched in Singapore in 2013, so about 3.5 years ago. What we have seen, there were some I guess critics, right, who were saying that with Grab, with companies like Grab, we're actually increasing the number of cars on the road because more drivers are renting cars to be on the Grab platform, to be drivers, right? Which is true, right? So the number of rented cars has gone up in Singapore, but the number of privately owned cars has come down. So some stats here. So back in compared to 2013, the number of rented cars has gone up by 40,000, but the number of private cars has come down by 60,000. So there's a net decrease of about 20,000 cars on the road. And the reason for that is because as the service becomes more reliable, faster, more affordable, people are finding that, hey, maybe they don't need to own their own cars. They can rely on a service like Grab to get to where they want to go, anytime, anywhere. So that's the reason why we're able to gradually reduce the number of cars on the road.
And on normal days, like if there's no rain and the buses, and the MRTs are working fine,
Yeah.
there will be no problem, except for maybe in some cases where the last mile from the MRT station to your office or
Yeah.
to your home, then you have to figure something out. But recently, you have been collaborating with a government agency.
Yeah.
It's
GovTech.
yeah,
That's right.
to come up with a solution
Yes.
and to provide shuttle buses.
Yes. So over the last 3 years, we've been doing quite well in terms of point-to-point transportation. But for every commuter that goes point to point, that means whether it's on a taxi or a private car, there are 6 more commuters who travel by bus, who travel by train, right? So we wanted to serve those commuters as well. And one way to do that was to go into the private bus segment, and that's where we decided to partner with GovTech, which is an agency in the government. So GovTech has a platform for private bus routing called Beeline. It's an open platform that we thought was very effective in matching buses with passengers, and it really complements what we're trying to do in terms of making transportation very, very reliable and convenient.
And this bus routes or this bus service is basically, is it based on the on demand basis or upon request? How or is it fixed?
So the interesting thing about Grab Shuttle, so that's the name of the service that we have. So the interesting thing about Grab Shuttle is that while it's a fixed route, we also enable our users to suggest new routes. So if you work in a particular location in Singapore, let's say in Mapletree, right, and it's actually a little bit difficult to get a ride there. And what you want is to get a ride from Mapletree to the nearest train station. And you can suggest the route. And if there's enough interest, enough demand for that route, we'll open that route. So we'll then send the bus, and then they will start serving those commuters.
So the public has to give recommendations, or they have to say, "Hey, I want it." Then you'll provide it. I see. So far you have about 47 routes.
So far, we have 47 routes. Some of them are based on these crowdsourcing routes.
All right. And this is connecting from the MRT station to their workplaces?
So various. So we most of it is for housing estates to the working area, the CBD area. We have one recently by a company, right, who actually wanted to provide transportation from their workplace to the MRT station, and so we opened that route recently, and we are open to other companies doing the same thing.
And Grab is pretty much data-driven company, and you have about 45 million downloads. Hence, you have like at least I don't know, billions of data.
A lot of data.
I mean, I don't know how you manage those data. It must be very expensive. But utilizing this data to actually help not just the company, but also the users and the drivers. You've introduced heat map, and then the demand heat map, where you provide location based on different time of the day, on which you could see high demand of Grab request. All right. In the future, would there be any more innovation like this? Data-driven innovation.
For sure. I mean, we are a very data-driven company, and that one of the use cases for the data that we have. And you're right, we collect a lot of data, right? And one of the use cases for that is to continually improve the matching algorithm that we have. So let me just quickly share an evolution of that.
Is that a daily battle for you?
It is. I mean, it's we are constantly fine-tuning it. The good news is that we've come to a point where it's fairly reliable. But not always so in the early days, right? When we started, our algorithm helped to just match the nearest passenger to the passenger to the nearest driver, by a straight line distance, right? And we did that because computationally that was the easiest thing to do.
Okay.
But then that doesn't take into account things like roads, right? So then we then updated the algorithm to take into account road distance, right? The nearest driver by road distance. But then again, that doesn't take into account traffic, doesn't take into account the direction of travel. So then we have to update that as well. Now we're looking at predictive demand, right?
Okay.
So which means that we are trying to forecast where the demand is coming from, so that we can then direct the drivers, our supply, to those areas at that right time, so that passengers are able to get a ride, their fares are more stable, drivers are able to earn a better income.
Grab Singapore is also working closely with the government of Singapore, to provide solutions. And you are basically also sharing data with the government agency.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we'll talk more about this initiative right after this break. We're still here recording a special episode of Agenda AWANI at the Grab's headquarters here in Singapore, with the head of Grab Singapore, Lim KJ.
Yes.
All right. Do you have an acronym like KJ or something?
No, just KJ.
Okay, now, you've been working closely with the government, and one example is through GovTech.
Yeah.
And what will be the future collaboration?
Yeah, so I think GovTech was a great example of how the public and the private sector collaborated for the benefit of commuters. With GovTech, we launched our service Grab Shuttle on the Beeline platform, and the whole purpose here is to sort of use data collectively between the data that we have and the data that the government have to identify specific routes that is not yet being served by either the existing public buses or the point-to-point services that we have. So we'll continue to work very closely with the government in improving the way commuters move in Singapore.
Can we talk a bit about the product? Would you introduce more features this year?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at our launches over the last few months, we have introduced basically almost one new service every month, and we'll continue to introduce services that will help us move towards our shared vision, right, of a car-light society in Singapore. Going back to the initial point about Singapore not having enough roads, enough land. It's extremely important that we move towards that car-light vision, so that Singapore becomes a more livable city.
Okay, now you have helped to take away 20,000 cars off the road, off Singapore road.
Well, we've contributed to that.
Yeah. Is there any ultimate number?
No, there's no. I wouldn't say there's an ultimate number, but we do hope that one day roads are clear enough that there's no traffic jams. You can get to anywhere you want to go seamlessly through the tap of an app across different modes of transport. I'm just giving you an example, right? You fire up the app, you key in the destination. It gives you three options, whether you want to go by speed, right? And obviously that will probably be the highest cost. You want to go by lowest cost, or maybe comfort, right? So let's say you go by cost, and it will take you across various modes of transport. You jump into a car, the car takes you to a train station. You take the train, you alight on the train, a shuttle is waiting for you and takes you to wherever you want to go, all through the app. So that's one vision that we have for Singapore.
So it's not just one end to end. I mean, one point A to point B.
Yeah.
You have also figuring out how to make it simple to everyone to actually use multiple
Modes of transport. That's right. That's right. I think that is extremely important if we want to, convince everybody to give up those who still own a car to give up their cars.
Exactly, exactly. Because you have to understand it in the context that here in Singapore, people are not using their cars anymore. Singaporeans, you don't buy cars. I mean, less people are buying car now.
Yeah. I'll share a personal example, right? I don't own a car, obviously, but my wife does.
Okay.
Right. And she owns a car because she works in a hospital. She needs to get to the hospital in short notice. And the day I can convince her to sell the car, right, I know that my work is done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very tough. All right. Now, before we end, maybe a bit of expansion question on expansion.
Yeah.
I mean, in Malaysia, you have like other cities where you can expand.
That's
but
right.
Singapore, how to expand, ma?
Yeah. We can go to Batam now. Just kidding. So Singapore, I think there's still a lot for us to do, right? So two parts. Transportation. We'll continue to invest in transportation until we reach that point where every ride can arrive within 3 minutes, right?
Okay.
That's the goal.
Okay. Now, what was the average waiting?
The average now is
time?
about with just Grab, it's now 3.3 minutes.
3.3 minutes.
Yeah. So we want to bring that down to below 3 minutes.
Okay.
Right. So that's transportation, right? I think, given that the population, you have 5.5 million population. There's a lot of commuters to serve. The other area that we want to invest in is payments. Right? So payments, in the sense, mobile payments. So being able to use your GrabPay credits to pay for not just transport but for other things as well.
So this is the space that we should watch. We should watch out this space,
Yeah.
And we can expect more innovation from Grab, and we look forward to more interesting things 5 years ahead.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you,
That was the head of Grab Singapore, Lim Kel J. We're talking about how has Grab has improved the livelihood of citizens of Singapore in terms of transportation. And we recorded this episode from the headquarters of Grab. They just celebrated their 5th anniversary recently. I'm Shafzan Johari, signing off. Bye-bye.